Hi folks, I absolutely love what I get to do. For those of you that have followed along since the days when I had a little benchtop tag in New York City to now, it's been a really fun 10-year run. And for about a year, I've had this idea of wanting to talk about one of our sort of chip break manufacturing entrepreneurship or business topics of preparing for a slowdown. And actually, I probably had this on my list to do for over a year because I remember thinking, man, this video is going to be a terrible video because what slowdown? Everything's been on fire and excellent for the last 10 plus years. And I thought, man, it's a topic I care so much about, and I wanted to figure out a way to talk about that. And now I think we've got the right opportunity because the world is changing a little bit. And I want to talk a little bit about our background and what we're doing here, what I think about what I think we're doing well, and what kind of concerns me around this idea of, look, ultimately I want to keep being able to do what I do. I don't want to ever lose my business or have it turn into from a business to a hobby that just loses money, if that makes sense. So hopefully some of the stuff here will be helpful for anyone else that's in the manufacturing business or really any sort of a business. I don't know it all. Seriously, I very much enjoy learning and listening to other folks. I have been doing this though for about 20 years. I lost a business due to a partnership, and at my old job, working in real estate in New York City, I had to personally handle properties that our company lost to foreclosure to lenders, and that has a pretty significant impact when you actually literally and figuratively have to hand over the keys and why you lost something. So speaking from a little bit of experience and certainly a lot of passion. When you look at generally accepted statistics around small businesses, something like half of them fail within about 5 years and fewer than a third make it more than 10 years. And we're coming up on that 10-year mark. And the number one thing I think about is start from the extreme. What causes you to lose your business is bankruptcy or some extreme event like that. And effectively, you can't go bankrupt if you don't owe anybody any money, because that's what bankruptcy is. You owe people money and you can't come up with it. I think some folks think of the extreme examples there, but really what that means is managing cash flow. So if you are new to accounting, go watch our video on the basics of accounting for manufacturing folks. You absolutely should have a very basic understanding of accounting terms and how that works. And I want to talk about 4 things specifically around accounting and business sustainability. The first is your income statement. This is your P&L, profit and loss. It's basically what do I bring in from sales minus what goes out the door for raw materials, cost of goods sold, and so forth. That ends up with a number called net income. That matters massively, and it's something that if you aren't comfortable with this, you should absolutely be having an accountant help you do. What I try to do is look at our income statement on a monthly basis, and the number matters to me, but actually not really, because over the last few months we've been buying more raw material because we've had some concerns I'll get into. So our monthly net income looks lower because we have higher cost of goods sold. Side note conversation, especially for the folks out there that are shopper and accounting, bigger question of whether you capitalize your raw material or you expense it immediately. Nevertheless, we've been buying a lot of raw material. So I actually don't really care about what an income statement says. The next common financial statement is a balance sheet. And this one is gold. You really don't lose your business, you can't go bankrupt if you've got a boatload of cash. So I try to maintain somewhere between 3 and 6 months of cash for this business to run itself. 6 months would be pretty extreme, assuming you had no revenue, because that's not really realistic, but you can criticize me all day long if you want for trying to focus on that. The reality is, it's a really nice buffer, an important thing to have. Third item is cash flow statement, and really this speaks to working capital, because remember how I said I don't really care about an income statement? Well, if you've now watched our accounting video, you understand the difference between cash and accrual accounting. I may sell really nice order to a company for $10,000 and I book that income on an accrual basis. So my income statement shows you got a $10,000 job on the books, nice job, but they may not pay for net 30, net 60, net 90, sometimes even worse, they may drag you out. You can't pay your lenders, you can't pay your rent, you can't pay your employees with a accounts receivable check. So managing cash flow, managing your working capital is incredibly important. We've actually done a separate video on kind of how we work with folks. Generally, we haven't had an issue, but getting paid and tracking that and having a system to track that for making sure outstanding invoices are notified and so forth, hugely important. And finally, the best time to get credit from a bank is when you don't need it. So for those of you who followed our story, the way I was raised and the fact that I got into this not knowing, I literally was like teaching myself on a TEG in New York City. It was kind of this idea of I have no business doing this. Obviously things have changed now. I'm a little bit more comfortable. But for those reasons, I always wanted to avoid borrowing money because this was so risky back then. And just, again, you can't go bankrupt if you don't owe anybody any money. And I still generally love that idea because, darn it, I just do. We'll come back to kind of why I do all this at the end. But it doesn't mean you can't use these things as tools. And so a couple of years ago, I was having lunch with a friend who's also a banker and has sort of become a banking relationship to us. And we brought up lines of credit. And long story short, we have a well into the six figures line of credit where all we have to do is pay a nominal fee, hundreds of dollars max per year to have that line of credit. I've never actually once drawn on it. To be honest, I had it mostly if I ever had that situation where somebody called up and said, hey, I need a huge amount of money today for this machine because something's happening, can you buy it or something like that. But I just thought, man, for $200, $300, $400 a year to have access to a six-figure credit card, a line of credit, and it works just like that. It's an amount on our online banking, and if I ever want to draw from it, I just hit it, and that money is instantly in my account. Now, that is debt. That is a loan. It's money you have to pay back, and the last thing I'll do is draw down on that to save a business that's otherwise going to fail. Big distinction there. Nevertheless, it's a effectively almost free option that I value, and the key is ask for it when you don't need it, and if you don't want it, you can always drop it. The next thing I think about is have a plan. Once a year, once every 6 months, just think about this. Don't live in a distorted world of where you don't ever think things are going to do anything but continue to go up and up and up. I remember working in the real estate sector 12 years ago, and people, the reason the housing market crashed was that all of the residential mortgage-backed security models didn't even account for the thought that housing prices won't always go up. It's been a wonderful 12-year run in the US economy and seemingly the global economy by and large. But economies are cyclical. I don't know the timing of it. Nobody knows the timing of it. So I can't time the markets, but they are cyclical, and it's almost certain that I will go through, and you watch this, will go through some form of a recession or major correction sometime in your lifetime or working lifetime. So don't be naive to that. Think about, hey, what could happen? Do our sales get cut in half? What does that look like? Just think about it. Similarly, try to listen to peers and mentors. And this is, I'll admit, this is something I have a hard time doing. And the case in point is I've got a good mentor who works in manufacturing, largely serving the oil and gas sector. A really nice, solid guy. And he talked to me once about how a couple of years ago, just how gutted he was. Their business was down significantly. Oil and gas was in the tank. That's a kind of a feast or famine business. And we happened to be having a pretty good month. So just to be totally honest, I was kind of internally a jerk, because I'm thinking, oh man, this guy's saying he's coming out of his own pocket to meet payroll, but like sometimes you just got to power through it. Because I was kind of projecting my own current state at that time internally to him. I couldn't empathize with him, if that makes sense. But since then, we've grown, and as we've grown, we've had some slow months and slow sales periods. And I'll tell you, I wish at the time, I can now empathize. I now realize, boy, it is really tough as you grow in obligations and responsibilities and equipment and staff. You can say you don't want to grow, but that's a whole other conversation. It can be a little bit difficult to not grow when you're in the manufacturing space. But I wish I had a better capacity to listen and really see what that's like of, hey, how long do I want to subsidize payroll before we have to change things up in a way that nobody ever wants to have to do? And finally, a lesson I'm super proud to sort of have from my grandfather, which is just work your butt off and hustle, especially if you have to. I grew up like this. I've since honestly taken a big step back. I don't work weekends. I don't work late nights. I love that. I love that I have a family and have a pretty good work-life balance. But darn it, the day I need to start going back and grinding, I'd be happy to do so. If it meant, what's the business need to get it through a period. My grandfather ran a millwright fabrication, structural steel type company, and they did a lot of work for a local power company. And if the power company needed trees cut in an area and none of their guys wanted to do it, and they'd call Jim up and Jim would say, yep, we'll come down and do it. And maybe that's an extreme example, but for me, I think about, man, if times got tough and I love what I do, I could train people, I could consult, we could go back to job shop work, we could go back to other forms of manufacturing that we know how to do, because ultimately the world isn't going to stop making stuff and we're pretty good at doing it, so I want to be around to be a player in that space. Okay, next topic is the big D word, debt. You can't always avoid it, and in fact now we are financing some of our machines. So really I don't want to sit here and lecture on a soapbox about the good or bad elements of debt. I just want to talk about the fact that I think we're in a pretty strange place over the last 12 years. We've kind of gone back to what led us into the 2008-2009 recession with really extended credit. Until recently we had very low interest rates. And really what blows my mind is throughout COVID, none of our local banks that I've talked to, almost none of them have had any credit loss on their books. They've not taken any properties back, foreclosed on equipment loans or borrowers, or had any refi issues. And that's not always healthy. It's kind of the forest fire analogy of it's good to have some small forest fires, because if you try to avoid those for 10 years, then the forest fire ends up being a situation where the whole forest burns down. And any banker that tells you don't worry about it, it'll be okay, frankly is full of you know what, because ultimately bankers change, banks change, policies change, the environment changes, and right now all of a sudden in the last 2 months the world has changed. Interest rates pursuant to the Fed have gone up big time. They've gone from sub 3 or 4 all the way up to 6. That's a big deal, and that's going to affect refi and refi costs, and ultimately what lenders really will care about, which is loan to value and debt service coverage ratio. So if you're borrowing money and you don't have a comfort of what those terms are, I would encourage you to think about it. So when we finance machines, we make sure the loan to value is pretty reasonable, and our debt service coverage ratio is frankly a slam dunk. That means we've got some dry powder, we've got some negotiating power if things get weird to go to the lender and say, no, we're good, we're going to be able to pay this without any issue. That will get pretty messy. I honestly thought it would have during COVID. The government came through and did what nobody thought, and hey, it is what it is. But again, very unlikely that the rest of my working career and yours is going to be the case where there isn't some sort of a correction in the lending markets. And finally, to wrap it up, again, I love what I do. I don't have all the answers, I don't know everything, but I've gotten this business to this point and I'm incredibly proud of it, and I want to keep doing it. I want to keep doing it in a way that lets us grow and have fun. I've always had a soft spot for the folks that are going from nothing to something. So it's that guy who's got a machine in his garage, getting that business started, has a passion for making stuff, CAD, CAM, fixturing. Like I really do love it. And so all of this video is meant to do is to talk about why we do what we do. Like, we only get one chance to live this life. You know, running this business is not just about being good at fusion, it's being good about managing some accounting basics and some risk and thinking about outcomes that maybe you haven't been through yet. I was just old enough to lose a few bucks in the dot-com crisis, and I'm glad I did, because that taught me a lesson. I lost my first business, Strike Mark, to a partnership, having had some real estate, I didn't own them, but working for properties where they got foreclosed on. That really stinks, but hey, you're better off for that. So hopefully this video is a way of sharing some of that. It reminds me of my top 10, or the top 10 small business entrepreneurship list by a guy named Jay Goltz. It was in the New York Times probably 10 years ago, and I love this list. And the number 10 bullet point on that list is something like, don't become a financially successful loser. You know, it's about the outcome, not the income. You know, everyone went home for the day. Some of the machines are still running. I'm going to leave in like 5 minutes and go hang out with my kids and my wife and do all that, but also keep thinking about this stuff, because I love this stuff. Thank you to everyone who's been along for the journey. It's been a fun ride, and it'll be exciting to see where we keep going from here. So what I'd like to ask is, what is your guys' advice? For those of you that have been around the block, that have had good fortunes and bad fortunes, what am I missing? What do you want to share or impart to me or our audience about things to think about if you're running and growing a business, how to not lose it all, how to be smart and be just prepared, but not overthink it. You know, at the end of the day, we got to make hearts, we got to live, you got to dance while the music's singing. So hope you folks learned something, hope you enjoyed. Take care. See you soon.